To read on all of this with James Freeman, the Wall Street Journal editorial page assistant editor. We've got Connell McShane, of course, of this network fame. And last but certainly not least, Democratic strategist Wendy, Osefo. Connell, your thoughts, so you were covering this, you talked to people who are out there and you know, whether they're shopping more, we clearly see that. The mood seems to be to buy. And I'm always wondering whether a lot of that is because of what the president proposed. What do you think?
Well, I think people were optimistic about the economy anyway. I mean, before the tax cuts passed, I think it was Quinnipiac that ran numbers, and the people said 60-some%, I think it was 63%, said the economy is either very good or excellent. So people were confident about the economy anyway.
And they wouldn't have done nearly as much shopping had they not had that confidence, right?
Right. I mean, I guess. I mean, and so, you know, people are feeling upbeat about the economy. We see something of a split between how people feel about the politics, whether it's the congressional ballot or even the president's popularity, even with these types of accomplishments. But separate from all that, I think people are already feeling confident about the economy. You
know, James, you and I were chatting a little earlier, this idea that does perception become reality? Is this perception, this pickup in activity that is very real when you look at the markets and what have happened in the economic numbers, and we'll just see more of it? Or do you just sort of fall off on the reality of it, sell on that reality, which is more the case, at least specifically so far today?
Well, we are late in a recovery, but it's been a really slow recovery. And what's remarkable is how we've seen this acceleration over the last few quarters. Looks like we're having another good quarter here in the fourth. Now we've got a big incentive to invest more in the United States. We've got a big encouragement for companies to expand. So I think, and on top of that, you've got, as you've been discussing, the paychecks are going to start getting fatter in February,
right.
March, that area. So I think there's going to be a very good economic story. And I think the president, by signing this, has given Republicans a fighting chance of bucking history and holding their majorities next fall.
Still, apparently, Mitch McConnell, Wendy, was worried enough to say that he's afraid one of the houses goes Democrat in the midterm election, and that's post this big tax cut victory. What do you think?
Well, you know what? That may remain unclear whether or not one goes. But what's really interesting here is individuals need to see that pay cut in their check, right? Around February, March, we need to energize individuals because right now the president has a very low approval rating. And that will weigh on whether one of the houses in Congress does go to the Democrats. If we continue to have this low approval rating, as well as individuals do not see any individualized benefit from this tax cut, then obviously, yeah, definitely the Democrats will take
the improvement in their net, like most everyone's going to see that in the check. If it's paltry, it doesn't look like what they thought it would be. It might not be the political gain that Republicans were hoping.
Yeah, it may not be the political game that Republicans are hoping, because what's going on with this president is that he happens to be not only dismissive but divisive, and those combinations do not work well. So it really weighs on his policy
all of that,
agenda.
If you think about it, when he got the tax cut through, divisive, dismissive, whatever you want to say, right?
He did, but at the end of the day, that's what it weighs upon is his legislative agenda. He cannot continue to divide the country. So he needs to continue moving along with this legislative agenda and continue to do things that people can say, you know what, he's actually moved the needle in this way.
I just wonder whether the president's popularity is more connected to what's going to happen in the midterms next year for congressional Republicans versus the economy and the stock market. Because the president...
You would think he'd be off to the races, given the economy and the markets alone.
He's never been popular as a political figure. I mean, on November 8th of 2016, the president's favorability rating was at 36% in Gallup, so he was 61% unfavorable, the worst in presidential polling history.
Yes.
He was elected president that night. So even in the Real Clear Politics average, which we watch...
That's a very good point.
...of the polls...
With that, he was elected president.
That night. I mean, and in the Real Clear Politics average of the polls, now he's at 38.5%. The highest he's ever been was 46% in early February. So it's been, if it was a stock, we'd be like, well, this is a really narrow range.
Yeah.
But all these accomplishments have come.
But it depends on what the other buying opportunities are. If the Democrats aren't gathering around a certain
So it might be a cautionary tale to Democrats in some ways.
Absolutely.
That's my point, I guess.
I wouldn't agree with that.
Why not?
I wouldn't agree with that because right now I think that the Democratic base is really energized and they're ready to go ahead.
Well, they got to find someone to energize around. And last I looked, there are going to be like 200 people running for president. Right?
And you know what? When the Republicans had 200 people running for president, look who came in. It was Donald Trump. So I think that may be what happens.
Fair enough, Wendy. You know, James, the other thing I think was not appreciated with this tax cut, and maybe it will be borne out, is what we're seeing companies do beyond just the expected buying back a stock and all this. And I think it's a curse of riches. I know Connell and I were getting into this, but this notion that besides the dramatically lower tax rate for them, the forgiveness of money held abroad coming back trillions of dollars worth, they don't know what to do with all this money. I actually think that's the case. And whether it's AT&T or Comcast or Wells Fargo, SBG, Sinclair, that now they might do both. They might do both to satisfy their shareholders and to give checks to workers. And that could be something that was not sort of baked into the cake when this all started. What do you think?
Well, I think especially with you mentioned AT&T, Comcast, these communications companies that have now gotten a double whammy of encouragement from Washington. The internet is not going to be regulated, so it means you can make a return when you invest in broadband and rolling out faster internet service.
Thing and this and all, but
now,
see what I mean? Like
now the tax
we've been
issue.
interpreting, the companies are getting all the bennies, and they might disproportionately still be that way. But if they share some of that loot, beyond just the obvious stuff, shoring up pension funds, public and private, which is good. This could be a whole nother development we didn't appreciate, like just sharing it immediately with workers.
Well, Kevin Hassett, now obviously the White House chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and some of his colleagues for really more than a decade have been studying economies all over the world. And what they find is when you cut that corporate income tax rate, a lot of that money ends up with workers because companies invest more.
Not immediately, though, right? In the past, they plowed it back in their side, which they're free to do.
It's not the $1,000 checks.
Right,
it's not here. We're gonna throw out a bonus now.
Different,
it's what happens is investment rises, and that means workers are more productive, and that means they can demand a higher salary, which is basically this is the path to higher living standards: is to get more productive so people can earn more because they're more valuable. We can produce more goods and services each hour, each day, whatever. So that's what we're getting back on the path on. And I think even beyond the nice surprise in February or March of having smaller withholding, I think rising wages is what we're going to see. And that's why I think Republicans in Congress who are hoping to hold on despite a rough history for the president's party in the first off-year election, I think they know that they're going to have a nice growing economy and results to show people.